So there's a family photo that I have from my childhood. And we were all in our Sunday best, and it was a beautiful afternoon. And we were sitting on a low concrete wall at the Civic Center in the heart of downtown Pine Bluff, Arkansas, where I grew up. And behind us, about 10 yards beyond us, you could see the library. It was one of the facilities in the Civic Center. But also in the spaces in between our bodies, you could see flowers peeking up through the flower bed that was encased in the wall we were sitting on. And there were multiple colors of flowers, but the ones that still stand out in my mind's eye and that stood out to me at the time were the red ones, because my favorite color was then and is still now red. She was seated second from the right as you view this photo in your mind's eye. And to her left, and so at the rightmost edge of the photo, was my young cousin. He was about 4 or 5, and he was tastefully dressed in a navy blue blazer and a navy blue tie and a white dress shirt and baby blue slacks. And his hair was cut very short, almost bald, and he was scowling at the camera, almost willing the photographer to end the shoot so he could go play and run and be wild in the way that boys would want to do outside at that age. And then to his right, to your left, was her, and she was holding my even younger cousin, who was a little less than 1 year old, and he had a bushy head of hair because it was considered bad luck to cut the child's hair before the first birthday. And he was wearing a baby blue set of coveralls over a white shirt, and the coveralls were short so you could see his chubby little legs. And someone next to the photographer was making a silly face because he was smiling. And to her right, again to your left, was my grandfather. And he was sitting with dignity in his suit, with his left hand resting on his lap. And his left hand would have been resting on his right hand, but his right hand had been chewed off by machinery in a farming accident decades earlier. So one of his sleeves just hung loose. And he sat there in his suit, and he looked great. And with that one hand, he had done the work to bring in the money that Grandma managed so well so that they could provide the food and the clothing and the housing for us. And it wasn't much money, but it was enough in their hands. And his part of it for his clothing was enough to ensure that he looked good. And it was a conservative 2-button navy blue suit with a snow white dress shirt and a purple, deep blue purple tie with tiny white dots, and was held in place by a gold tie clip. And to top it off, it was a straw fedora with a brown band. And even though he had a lazy eye, the one good eye looked deep into the camera with confidence because, again, he knew that he was dapper. If there had been a black advertising agency on Madison Avenue, he would have fit right in. If Don Draper had been a one-handed black man from the South with one lazy eye and Christian morals, he could have been my grandfather. And to his right, and at the leftmost edge of the photo as you view it in your mind's eye, was me. And I sat there in my suit, the first dress suit that my grandmother had let me choose for myself. And I was proud to wear it. But she was not proud. She did not approve of my choice because it didn't fit with the look that she wanted for me, which was also the look that she chose for herself. And that look was exemplified by what she was wearing this day. It was a simple monochromatic dress. It was an indistinct pastel. I think it was pink, but you really can't tell for sure. And the collar was high and the sleeves were long, and the fit was just snug enough so that you would have no doubt that she was a woman, but not so snug as to be inappropriate. And it was the look, when you paired this with her very simple but perfect hairdo and her understated smile, it was the look that said she wanted you just for a moment to notice her and notice that she looked good, but before you were tempted to engage with her in conversation, you would notice someone else and move on. And that was the same look that she took with her every Sunday to church, when she would eagerly and quickly disappear into the collective grandeur of the deaconesses, the wives of the deacons, and they would sit all together on the front pew of the Damascus Missionary Baptist Church. And on communion days, they would all wear white. And she would disappear in their collective grandeur. And it was pleasant to her because they were admired as a collective. And because they were admired as a collective, she could be admired without having to stand out or stand up and sing a solo or ever deliver a speech, which she never did. And that was the same look that she took with Grandpa when they would get into the green station wagon with me and go to school in the evening for parent-teacher conferences, which they never, ever missed. And he would sit down with his 8th grade education, and she would sit down with her 6th grade education, and they would sit across the desk from my teachers, who all had a college degree or more, and who all wore the white skin that, in the South, as in many places, but with special force in the South, signaled privilege and status, and could potentially signal to them that they were less than, but if they were intimidated, they never let it be shown because they were always there, because they loved me and wanted the best for me. But Grandpa always did the talking. At home, though, Grandma would say a bit more. She would talk a bit more. She still held a bit back, but she would let us know what she thought a bit more, and she would let me know her opinions, including the opinion that at school, even if I knew the teacher was wrong, I should never question her. I should never talk back. Democratic pedagogy be damned. She knew that in the South, at least in the South that she had known growing up, that there were risks associated with the black boy talking back to authority, and she urged me to keep my head down. When she learned that my favorite color was red, she said, well, there are other colors that could be your favorite color. What about brown? What about gray? What about navy blue? Keep your head down. And when she chose the clothes for me that she chose for my childhood, we would go to Sears Roebuck and JCPenney, and she would choose dark colors, solids, simple things that were never on the cutting edge of fashion, but never quite out of fashion, which was quite cost effective because they lasted. But it was also a part of her hope to teach me to keep my head down. And I hated it. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be heard. And so I was so excited when I was around 14, shortly before that photo, she gave me money and said, you can go choose your dress suit for this season. And so I took the bus, not to Sears Roebuck, not to JCPenney, but downtown where there's this block with these 3 stores, narrow storefronts side by side. One of them is called Superbad. And next to that is Looking Good. And then next to that, Looking Better, because why not? And in front of each one of those 3 stores, there was always an African-American man acting as a kind of carnival barker, beckoning those of us who wanted to look fresh and urban to come inside. And I went inside, and I came out having purchased fake black patent leather Stacey Adams dress shoes, a black polyester suit, double-breasted because that was hot at the time, not a regular dress shirt, but a tuxedo-style dress shirt with the wingtip collar and a black bow tie. And the color wasn't white, the color of the shirt was red. And that was the suit and the shirt that I was proudly wearing in the photo. And I was so proud to be wearing it with my Heavy D and the Boys eyeglasses. And if you don't know Heavy D and the Boys, dear white people of Maine, Google it. I don't have time to explain it. But I was so proud. Grandma was not so proud. Grandpa, I think, was amused because he knew that I would eventually wise up, and I'd be a little bit embarrassed of this when I was older, but Grandma worried that I might never wise up. But I did wise up, and in fact, now that I'm an adult, when I dress up, the things that I look for are solids, blacks, and grays, exactly the things that she chose for me. And that was but one example of how I later realized she was right. And it wasn't that in the case of the clothing, I wanted to disappear as she hoped to, but I ultimately wanted that style of clothing so that people would recognize me not for my clothing, but for my ideas and what I had to say. And there were so many other examples that I don't have time to go into of ways in which I look back and I wish that I had respected her intelligence so much more and that I had belittled her so much less. And in belittling her intelligence, I realize in retrospect that I helped to make her feel small in those ways that would make her crave the safety of invisibility. About 5 years ago, I was sitting in one of those front pews at the Damascus Missionary Baptist Church for a ceremony where she was finally the center of attention because it was her funeral. And the minister delivered a rather generic eulogy. He celebrated her as a good soldier. And he celebrated her in ways that had no texture, no detail, that didn't suggest that he had ever taken the time to get to know what made her a unique individual. And I and other members of my family were angry at this. But when I thought more, my anger faded away, and it faded into sadness, because I realized that she had always sought refuge in invisibility. And even if he had made the effort to get to know her better, there were immense limits on what she would have revealed to him. And just as I had wished that I had done things differently and I had listened to her and sought out her personality and her details more, I wished in that moment, as I sat on the pew, that she had done some things differently. I wish that from time to time she had stood up and said to the minister and said to the congregation and said to my teachers and said to Grandpa and said to me, "Listen to me. My name is Blanche Skull, and actually, my favorite color is red." Thanks.